Hey, how's everybody doing tonight? Hotep. How's everybody doing today? Hey, this is Michael M. Hotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. Hope everybody's doing all right. I talked about this topic before. I want to talk about it again. Colin Kaepernick, who used to play for the San Francisco 49ers, he was in Ghana for the 4th of July holiday. And he did a Instagram post, and he asked a very interesting question to African Americans who celebrate the 4th of July. Okay, so we're going to talk about that some today, and we'll go over his comments, and we'll deal with some of the history of the 4th of July, and also talk about a little bit about Frederick Douglass, because Frederick Douglass, who was an abolitionist, runaway slave, he gave probably his most well-known speech July 5th, 1852. And it was called "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." What to the slave is the 4th of July. So we'll talk to him about that. We're broadcasting on Facebook Live. How's everybody doing on Facebook Live? See you posting your comments. Jason and Natalie and Roslyn and Erica, how you all doing? Then also what we'll do a brief overview, a brief preview of an online course that I teach called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We'll talk some about that because I'm doing, normally the class meets on Fridays. It's an online course, but we're doing a special session on Sunday, July 8th, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Okay, so we'll talk some about that also. All right, so how's everybody doing today? Okay, so you've heard me talk about the 4th of July in the past, and how I think it doesn't make sense for African Americans to celebrate the 4th of July. Because at this time, this is during the American Revolutionary War, which is from 1775 to 1783. You have about approximately 500,000 enslaved African people in this country at the time. These are the British colonies that are breaking away and are in rebellion against Great Britain, and they're fighting for their freedom, at the same time enslaving African people, depriving them of their nationality, their humanity, their freedom, etc. But they wanted to declare their independence. And the Declaration of Independence was partly written by Thomas Jefferson. He was on the 5-man committee. Well, I'm sorry, largely written by Thomas Jefferson. And then he's on the 5-man committee for the drafting of the, he's on the 5-man committee, and then he's going to largely write the U.S. Constitution, I should say. Okay, 1787 during the Philadelphia Convention. Okay, so I want to deal with 2 articles here about this topic, and share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. Also, share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in as well. Okay, so 2 articles I want to look at. One from AtlantaBlackStar.com, which is an African American owned news outlet. Check out AtlantaBlackStar.com. Shout out to Neil Nelson at AtlantaBlackStar.com. They're doing some fantastic work there. A very, very good publication. AtlantaBlackStar.com. Then also DailyMail.co.uk. Okay, good publication. We don't own it. We don't own the Daily Mail. Okay, so but good publication. DailyMail.co.uk. All right. So the article from AtlantaBlackStar.com is called "Colin Kaepernick Questions Celebration of 4th of July, Finds Independence at Home in Ghana." Okay, Colin Kaepernick questions celebration of 4th of July, finds independence at home in Ghana. All right, and then the one from Daily Mail, from the Daily Mail, the actual name of the article, if you actually look at the link, is "Colin Kaepernick Visits Ghana Ancestral Roots Hospital." Okay, but the caption for it says, "How can we truly celebrate independence on the day that intentionally robbed our ancestors of theirs? Quarterback Colin Kaepernick posts controversial message as he visits Ghana." Okay, his question was legitimate, but I don't understand what's controversial about it if you understand history. So you have a white publication saying his comments were controversial, but the African-American publication didn't say in the headlines that his comments were controversial. There's nothing controversial about it. All right. So what happened was Colin Kaepernick used to play for the San Francisco 49ers. Right. And we know in August of 2016, during the preseason, there are four preseason games in the NFL. He was sitting on the bench during the national anthem. So normally during the national anthem, both teams in the football game, they stand for the national anthem, and some people in the crowd stand also. So Steve Weiss, who writes for NFL.com, Steve Weiss asked the question to Colin Kaepernick at the post-game press conference, why was he sitting on the bench, right? And Colin Kaepernick said, I'm not going to stand up to show pride in the flag for a country that oppresses Black people and people of color. Okay. He said, to me, this is bigger than football, and it would be selfish on my part to look the other way. There are bodies in the street and people getting paid leave and getting away with murder. Okay, so this starts a whole firestorm. This is going to continue for months, right? And everybody remembers this. Okay, and he goes from sitting on the bench to kneeling, right? So since he's a free agent, he's no longer with the San Francisco 49ers. No teams have picked him up. There was one article about him having a tryout with Seattle Seahawks, but there's been a lot of hatred towards Colin Kaepernick. He's received death threats, things like this. And there was one article, first of all, this article here from August 27th, 2016. This is probably the article that started it all. Is by Steve Weiss, W-I-C-H-E. It's called Colin Kaepernick Explains Why He Sat During National Anthem. Colin Kaepernick explains why he sat during National Anthem. Okay. And this is for NFL.com. And I actually did a presentation last year, September 2016, dealing with Colin Kaepernick and his stance. So I have dozens of articles on this subject. Okay, so you've had there was one article that was interviewed 7 executives of that were executives at 7 different NFL teams, and these guys they didn't give any names, but these guys said that they didn't want Colin Kaepernick on their team. Some of them talked about how they hated him for standing up against the national anthem, etc. And you had one who said that if the team owner wanted Colin Kaepernick on that team, that he would quit. Okay. And there's a concerted effort, it appears, to silence Colin Kaepernick, to blackball him. And you keep in mind that most of the NFL teams are owned by white supremacists, billionaires, they're owned by white supremacists, majority of them. And they are afraid, it appears, that if Colin Kaepernick gets on their team, then his consciousness will spread to some of the other teammates, especially the African-American teammates, and it could cause a rebellion. Okay. So is an effort to silence him. So what happened was Colin Kaepernick has traced his DNA ancestry, right? And he's traced it to Ghana. So during the 4th of July holiday, he went to Ghana along with his fiance, DJ Nisa Diab. Okay. And from Ghana, Colin Kaepernick posted on Instagram, and he asked the question, how can we truly celebrate independence on the day that robbed our ancestors of theirs? So this was a message to African Americans. Okay. So he made the trip to Ghana with his girlfriend and fiance, because from my understanding, they are engaged. Hot 97 DJ Nisa Diab. And the pair received a warm welcome in Ghana. He has a short video on YouTube. On his Instagram page. And they have the video in the article from the Daily Mail. Okay. But in the beginning of the video, they have a clip. They have a video clip, and it opens with the following lines from Frederick Douglass from his 1852 speech, "What to the slave is the 4th of July." It says, "What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? What have I or those I represent have to do with your national independence?" Okay. And so a narrator says this, and the camera cuts to the male and female slave dungeons at the Elmina Castle, which is in Ghana. Okay, the majority of the slave dungeons you're going to find at one point they were in Ghana, the majority of them. Okay, and the slave dungeons were the holding cells before they would put African people on the slave ships. Okay, so they're going to visit Keta municipal hospitals for children. They visit the children's ward, and they watch the performance by the local community. Kaepernick also was not afraid to get his hands dirty while assisting women with gathering building materials. Okay. Now, Colin Kaepernick has been heavily focusing on charity work since he launched his National Anthem protests at the start of the 2016 NFL season, actually during the preseason. Okay. And we know there's been significant backlash behind that. Okay. So this is the article from AtlantaBlackStar.com. Now, the article from the Daily Mail is it's a longer article, but I just find it interesting that in the headlines they have the exact quote for him, which is good. "How can we truly celebrate independence on the day that intensely robbed our ancestors of theirs?" But then they say quarterback Colin Kaepernick posts controversial message as he visits Ghana. Okay, and there's nothing controversial about it. He's telling the truth. All right, so you have some African Americans who celebrate the 4th of July, or as Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango called it, the 4th of July. Okay, because they lied. It was their independence, it's not our independence. And at the same time, it's also important to understand that you had more African Americans who ran away and went to go fight for the British than who actually fought for the colonies. There were 5,000 who fought for the colonies. On the low end, there were 20,000 to 30,000 that fought for the British, because the British said, "If you come fight for us, we'll set you free." And they were the first ones to do this. Okay, they said, "If you come fight for us, we'll set you free." All right, and you know, when you look at they were called loyalists. They were called British loyalists. And if you look at the movie The Book of Negroes, the miniseries, The Book of Negroes, that was on BET, this talks about that history. Okay, because a lot of times we'll talk about African Americans who fought on behalf of the colonies, like Peter Salem, right? But we don't talk about the ones who fought on behalf of Great Britain. Okay, so when we look at the article, and we'll go to some of your comments here in just a minute. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. Okay, so when we look at the article from the Guardian, the Daily Mail, I should say the Daily Mail. Guardian is another UK publication. They talk about Colin Kaepernick also, and they have some great pictures of him as well. I'll show you some of these pictures. But it says in an Instagram post alongside the video, Kaepernick explained, quote, "In a quest to find my personal independence, I had to find out where my ancestors came from. In a quest to find my personal independence, I had to find out where my ancestors came from." Okay. And he told of how he traces ancestral roots to Ghana. And he said, quote, "I wanted to visit the sites responsible for myself for being forced into these hells of the Middle Passage." Okay. Now, it's important for people to understand that Colin Kaepernick was adopted by a white couple. Okay. He's half African-American, half white, but he was raised by an adoptive white family. Okay. So he has enough sense to realize he has to trace his ancestry and reconnect to Africa. He has enough sense to understand this. Okay, so now when we deal with the Middle Passage is the leg of the triangular trade which was from Africa to the Americas. Okay, it could be Central America, it could be the Caribbean, it could be South America. That was the leg of what was known as the triangular trade. It's called the Middle Passage. All right, now it's very important to understand, and we deal with this in the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. If you see some of our Facebook posts on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, if you listen to my radio show, the African History Network show, even though the transatlantic slave trade happened, there were millions of African people in North, Central, and South America for tens of thousands of years. Okay, we were in this country that we call the United States of America going back at least 51,700 years. And if you read the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep, and this is one of the books we use in the online course, right? One of the books we reference. You don't have to buy the book to follow along in the course, anything like this. But if you read this book, and we'll talk some about this information in a few minutes, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, you know, this was our land stolen from us. African people were here before Native Americans even came into existence. This is why it's so important to understand your history, because then you know what to fight for. Okay, you understand which direction to go in. Most of our people suffer from what I call the 1619 myth. We operate based upon the myth that the history of African Americans started August 20th, 1619 in this country, and that's just historically not accurate. Okay, and this is one of the things we talked about in the class last night. Okay, in the session of the online course that took place last night. This is one of the things we dealt with. Okay, so let me scroll down here. I'm going to show you this article, and I don't know why this big ass ad is here from HostGator. I hate these damn ads. Okay, so this is the article from the Daily Mail, and let me blow this up for you. How can we truly celebrate independence on the day that intentionally robbed our ancestors of theirs, right? And then there's pictures of Colin Kaepernick here. Now here he is in Ghana, looking like a Ghanaian chief. Okay, here he is in Ghana. And let's see, let's scroll down. Here he is with his fiance DJ Nisa Diab, and she is the one. When I did a lot of research on Colin Kaepernick and his stance, right? His protests against, he was protesting against police misconduct and the oppression of African Americans and people of color, and he's protesting against white supremacy. And he chose kneeling or sitting down during the national anthem to draw attention to that. It wasn't he wasn't against the troops. He wasn't against the military or anything like this. Okay, so all right, so here he is also. They are in looks like probably one of the villages or something like that. They're in the Ghanaian town of Keita. Okay. All right, so he said that, and let me blow this back up for you here. All right, so he said, I wanted to see a fraction of what they saw before the point of no return. All right, so he's talking about he wanted to reconnect to his ancestral roots. He said, I wanted to visit the sites responsible for myself for being forced into the hills of the Middle Passage. All right, it's important for African people to understand that we were already here in this land we call the United States of America today, that we call this. We were already here for tens of thousands of years. So yes, African people originally come from Africa. We just came tens of thousands of years before we thought we came. And then when we look at the numbers that were brought to this land during the transatlantic slave trade, you're looking on the low end, 388,000 to the high end, 1.4 million. A very small percentage actually come to this land. I'm not saying they didn't. I'm not trying to minimize the severity of the transatlantic slave trade, but we have to understand it, because I hear some people saying 100 million people came here. No, that's just historically, factually inaccurate. That's not true. Okay, about 90 to 95%, depending upon which total numbers you look at, right? Only a small percentage actually come here. 90-95% are taken to South America. They're taken into the Caribbean, Haiti, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Jamaica, taken into Central America, Honduras, Panama, things like this. The overwhelming majority don't come here. Okay, so it's important for us to understand this. It's important for us to understand this history. Now, one of the things that's going to happen is that you have the Khoisan, who have the oldest DNA on the planet. The Khoisan come from Southern Africa. They're also known as the Khoi Khoi. And they're the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. They go all around the world. They have the oldest DNA on the planet. So you're going to have them here. You have a presence from ancient Egypt here as well, ancient Kemet. You're going to have pyramid mounds built up and down the Mississippi River. At one point, all throughout this land, there were about 1 million pyramid mounds all throughout this land. If you go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, you can listen to interviews I've done with Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. Okay. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. That's our website. That's our official website. And we have over 750 archive episodes of my radio show there. Okay. And those are all free to listen to. I interviewed Dr. David Imhotep. I think it was back in April 2017, the last time I had him on. So go back and check out those interviews, okay? And they're on iTunes also, our iTunes channel, the African History Network show. So you're going to have Asians who come here around 3000 BC, okay? And you're going to have the Africans and the Asians who intermix, and their offspring are who we call Native Americans, okay? You're going to have the Africans and Asians who intermix, and their offspring are going to be who we call Native Americans. When you look at old black and white photographs of Native Americans, these were not light-skinned or almost white-looking people. These were dark-skinned people, okay? When Europeans come here, you're also going to have a lot of these African nations that are going to be reclassified as Native Americans or called Indians. So when you study Captain John Smith, Jamestown, Virginia, 1607, and Dr. David Imhotep deals with this in his book. Captain John Smith talks about being captured by a group of black Indians, because African people, we were already here in this land. Okay. But that's something that's not talked about. So these are some of the types of things we deal with in the online course that I teach also. All right. So the article goes on to say here, and it's still trying to load. Okay. So he traces ancestral DNA back to Ghana. He visits a local hospital in Keta. He ate a local dish named Banku at locals' homes and paid his respects at Kwame Nkrumah's Memorial Park, named after the first Ghanaian president of of Ghana, the first Ghanaian president, the first president of Ghana. This was when Ghana wins its independence from the British in 1957. Kwame Nkrumah. Okay, so that's something very significant for him to have the consciousness to go pay his respects to Kwame Nkrumah's memorial. Okay, that's so his respects at Kwame Nkrumah's Memorial Park. That's something very admirable as well. And one thing to understand is that the civil rights movement in this country was happening concurrently with the African liberation movement on the continent of Africa. They were happening at the same time. Okay. And they were drawing strength from one another. They were learning from one another. Dr. King was in Ghana in 1957. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was in Ghana in 1957 for the celebration of Ghana's independence. And he goes there, he meets Kwame Nkrumah. And he goes there each year on the anniversary of their celebration. This is something a lot of people don't know about Dr. King. Okay. Okay, so let's continue. All right, so Colin Kaepernick said, "I felt their love and I truly hope they felt mine in return." He finished in his post on Instagram to his 1.6 million followers. Okay, here's another picture here. Colin Kaepernick told of how he traced his ancestral roots to Ghana, adding, "I wanted to visit the sites responsible for myself for being forced into the hills of the Middle Passage." So he's here doing some some type of work or something like that. His fiance's with them also. Here he is, visited a local hospital in Keta in Ghana and ate a local dish named Banku. All right, so here he is with Ghanaian children. All right. And here he is with his fiance, Dija Nisa Diab, also as well, with some more Ghanaians also. Okay. All right. Now, Kaepernick has taken up several humanitarian causes over the past few months to pass his time as a free agent. He gave away his famous sneaker collection to the homeless in San Francisco in January. Raised money to donate food and water to Somalia in March. He was part of a group that raised thousands of dollars to donate money to Somalia, donate food to Somalia. He also gave a $50,000 donation to Meals on Wheels and donated hundreds of custom suits to a charity which helps former inmates secure jobs. Now, the donation to Meals on Wheels, if I remember correctly, that was after Donald Trump's draconian budget came out that cut a percentage of the overall funding to Meals on Wheels. The majority of funding for Meals on Wheels does not come from the federal government, but they cut it out. That was Mick Mulvaney, the budget director, who needs his head examined also with all these draconian cuts. But this is what I warn people about Donald Trump. People didn't want to listen. Here is, let's see, let's blow this up again for you. I'm using two different technologies here. So a lot of people don't even know you can have this capability on Facebook to show a website like this. I'm using another service to be able to do this. I'm broadcasting through Crowdcast onto Facebook. Here's another picture of Colin Kaepernick in Ghana. Right here he is kneeling. So Kaepernick recently compared police officers to fugitive slave patrolmen after a Minnesota police officer was acquitted of manslaughter in the fatal shooting of a black motorist. He tweeted an image over the weekend of a police badge beside a fugitive slave patrol alongside the caption, "You can't ignore your history. Always remember who they are." Okay. He was responding to the news on Friday that Officer Geronimo Yanez was not guilty of murdering 32-year-old Philando Castillo at a traffic stop in a St. Paul suburb last year. Okay. All right. So, and when you studied it is true. And even in the document from the Congressional Black Caucus called "We Have a Lot to Lose. We Have a Lot to Lose." And I have that document somewhere around here. I guess it's in my backpack for when I go do radio interviews. It's not here at the desk, but we have a lot to lose. They even in the beginning, they deal with is a 130-page agenda that the Congressional Black Caucus put together. They presented to Donald Trump in their meeting with him March 22nd, 2017. And in the beginning, it lays out history of African Americans to understand how we got into this predicament. Okay, then they lay out problems and then they lay out solutions and 50 pieces of legislation that could address these issues that they laid out. And one of the things in the history that they talk about is how the modern day police department has its origins in the slave patrols that will patrol the back roads looking for runaway slaves, things like this. And the night watchers, etc. Okay, it has its origin with that. Okay, now this is not saying that police are not needed in our communities, but we need them to enforce the law and actually protect the people that they're paid to protect, as opposed to participate in police misconduct, etc. Okay. And at the same time, people have to understand there are approximately 18,500 police departments in the country, about 800,000 law enforcement officers as well. So I've done a lot of research on this. You go back, listen to my shows. I deal with this also. So this is not an indictment of all 800,000 law enforcement officers, but this is talking about the percentage, the small percentage that are the bad ones. And then also those that turn a blind eye and cover up, like we saw in Chicago with the Laquan McDonald killing, right? You had police officers on the scene who during interrogations or questioning of witnesses tried to coerce witnesses to change testimony to fit a lie that they were trying to tell about Laquan McDonald. You have one officer who goes to a local Burger King restaurant in the area and erases video surveillance footage because it appeared that some of the encounter with Laquan McDonald was recorded by that security camera. Okay, so it's not just the ones that commit the act. There was only one officer who shot and killed Laquan McDonald. Officer Jason Van Dyke shot him 16 times. I don't know if he thought this dude was Superman or the Hulk or something like that. Shot him. 14 of the shots were when Laquan McDonald was on the ground. But then you have some of the other officers who helped in the cover-up. They're at least on the scene. I'm not saying the entire Chicago Police Department, which is about 13,000 officers, but we're at least talking about a large percentage of the ones who were on the scene there. Okay. All right. So, okay. Now, when we look at Frederick Douglass, right? So here's check out this article here from the Daily Mail also. All right. Good article about Colin Kaepernick. Just don't understand the caption about controversial statements, okay? Because there ain't nothing controversial. He told the truth, all right? Frederick Douglass was the most significant African-American figure in the 19th century. And he was a runaway slave, right? He ran away in 1838 from a plantation in Maryland. Frederick Douglass did not know his date of birth or for certain the year he was born in. He said he was born in either 1817 or 1818. When you read his first autobiography, he wrote 3 autobiographies, okay? His first autobiography is this one. It's called Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. He wrote this in 1845 when he was 27 or 28 years old. And this ties right into Colin Kaepernick because in 1852, July 5th of 1852, Frederick Douglass gave arguably his most important speech, and his most well-known speech is called "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." What to the slave is the 4th of July. Okay, and he's going to become an abolitionist. But Frederick Douglass was literate. He was taught to read and write. One of his slave owners, his wife, last name Auld, A-U-L-D, I think it was. She started teaching him the alphabet, things like this, because at one point he was a house servant. Okay, the slave master found out about this, forbade him to teach him to read or write, and he basically said that if you teach a slave to read or write, they will want to be free. Okay. But Frederick Douglass talked about the emptiness he felt from not knowing his date of birth, not knowing the year he was born. Okay. Anything like that. And he said that I do not remember on page 1 of his autobiography. He said, I do not remember to have ever met a slave who could tell of his birthday. I do not ever remember ever meeting a slave who could tell of his birthday. They seldom come nearer to it than planting time, harvest time, cherry time, springtime, or fall time. So they would, because most enslaved Africans couldn't count. Couldn't read. Okay. We didn't have birth certificates, right? So they would estimate their birthday around the season of the year, around the planting of crops, the harvesting of crops, etc. Okay, and he talked about how he wanted to know that information, the date of his birth, the year of his birth, and how he, when he was a child, he had white children who were friends of his. Even though he was enslaved, he had white children who were friends of his. And he said all of them knew their date of birth and they knew what year they were born in. They could celebrate their birthday, things like this. and it caused him to have an emptiness inside. And he said he could never ask his master about this. He said, I was not allowed to make any inquiries of my master concerning it. He deemed all such inquiries on the part of a slave improper and impertinent and evidence of a restless spirit. Okay. The near estimate I can give makes me now between 27 and 28 years of age. I come to this from hearing my master say sometime during 1835, I was about 17 years old. Okay. So that's the best he could do. Now, Frederick Douglass assumed birth date was February 14th because he didn't know the date of his birth. So he adopted February 14th as his birth date. Okay. And 1852 is going to be 2 years before the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which dealt with giving sovereignty to settlers in the West to determine whether or not they wanted to have slavery in those Western territories. Okay, this is coming from the U.S. And as a direct result of the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, you're going to have the Republican Party founded in 1854 by groups of abolitionists. The Republican Party that exists today, the Republican Party was originally founded in 1854 by groups of abolitionists to be the counter to the Democratic Party, because originally the Democratic Party was the party of the aristocracy, the party of the largely of the Southerners, the party of the slave owners, the plantation owners, things like this, right? So you have the Republican Party that becomes the opposition to that, okay? But things are going to flip. This is what people don't understand. So this is why when people quote Malcolm X talking about the obstructionist Democrats, you have to understand he's talking about that before the change happens, before the flip happens. And the flip is going to happen because of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, signed July 2nd, 1964, because of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, because of Executive Order 11246, which we call affirmative action in September of 1965, I think it was September 25th, 1965, because of the Fair Housing Act of 1968, because of these things, because of the civil rights movement advances made, the obstructionist Democrats, they're going to leave the Democratic Party. And where did they go? Where did they go? Who can tell? Those obstructionist Democrats who filibustered the Civil Rights Bill in 1964. So when you hear Malcolm's speech or you read the transcript of Malcolm's speech, like if you read the book, where's that book? Malcolm X Speaks. Where's my book? When you read Malcolm X Speaks, here it is. When you read Malcolm X Speaks, right? And this has transcripts of his speeches in here, some of his speeches, like the Battle of the Bullet, April 3rd, 1964, Cleveland, Ohio. Okay. And Malcolm talks about, now this is the month after he officially separates from the Nation of Islam. He officially separates from the Nation of Islam, March 8th, 1964. Okay. March 26th, 1964, he goes to hear the Senate bill debate from the U.S. Senate over the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And in his speech, April 3rd, 1964, the Battle of the Bullet, he talks about the obstructionist Democrats who are filibustering the bill. And he said, I was just there last week watching it, blah, blah, blah. Right. This is before the flip happens. This is before the change happens. OK. Nobody got that answer. Nobody got that answer. I'm looking at the comments. Nobody got that answer. When the obstructionist Democrats, after the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act are passed, right? These obstructionist Democrats, they leave the Democratic Party. Where do they go? This is why we have to understand history. You're going to have African Americans who switch over from the Republican Party largely and become Democrats. We see it starting in 1960. Largely, we see it'll go back some to the Great Depression, but we see it largely starting in 1960. Reason why is because 1960, The presidential race is John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. Now, Richard Nixon was a former vice president. Dr. King gets arrested at a lunch counter sit-in. I think it was in Atlanta. He's thrown in jail. John F. Kennedy calls Coretta Scott King and says, I'm sorry to hear about Dr. King being arrested. He asks, is there anything I can do? Right. So he makes a call. He gets Dr. King sprung from jail. So this is big news. Dr. King's free. So a lot of African Americans vote for John F. Kennedy. And this helps put Kennedy over the top, puts him in the White House. And Kennedy talks about civil rights, some things like this, right? Then June 11th, 1963, Kennedy gives a well-known television address talking about the needs for civil rights, because there have been protests taking place. There have been fire bombings, all different types of things like this. 4 hours after that, 12:30 a.m., July 12, 1963, Medgar Evers is assassinated in Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, if I remember correctly. He's assassinated by Byron Della Beckwith, who was a member of the White Citizens Council in Mississippi. And the White Citizens Council would, in many ways, White Citizens Council was even worse than the Ku Klux Klan, okay, because of the type of political power that the White Citizens Council had. The White Citizens Council was founded in Mississippi in 1954 as a direct response to the Brown versus Board of Education desegregation case, U.S. Supreme Court case of 1954. And the White Citizens Council was made up of bankers. They were made up of landowners, plantation owners, farmers, businessmen, things like this. And they didn't wear hoods. They did not wear hoods. They were out in the open. And so they start in Mississippi, and the White Citizens Council spreads all throughout the South. They're in all levels of government. They're in the state legislatures, all things like this, to suppress African Americans, to suppress the civil rights movement, etc. You're going to have the White Citizens Council in Mississippi to put their political weight behind Ross Barnett, who was running for governor, and Ross Barnett becomes governor of the state of Mississippi, heavily supported by the White Citizens Council. In the White Citizens Council, this is who Medgar Evers and the NAACP were fighting in Mississippi when they were fighting for when they were trying to register people to vote and fighting for the right to vote, etc. Okay, so it's important to understand this history. All right, so how's everybody doing? So a couple people commented, and they said the Republican Party. One person asked a question. Who was that? Republican Party. Okay, only two people got that answer. Okay, this is a significant piece of history. Okay, this is a significant piece of history. We have to understand how that switch happened. Okay, Charles Singleton said the Republican Party, and somebody asked the question, was it the Republican Party? Yeah, they leave the Democratic Party largely and go to the Republican Party. And that's where they are today. That when you study all these laws coming out, when you study all these policies, 99% of this crazy nonsense is coming from Republicans. I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but I study policy. When you see all this stuff coming, when you look at the rampant voter suppression, when you look at Donald Trump's voter integrity commission, which is going to be an excuse to have nationwide voter suppression, when you look at this past election cycle, you had 868 fewer voting polls. You had 13 new states that have voter ID laws. These are laws written by Republicans largely, the voter suppression laws. When you look at who's trying to take away health care from 22 million people, these are Republicans. Strom Thurmond, who ran for president as a Dixiecrat in 1948. Okay, the Dixiecrat was is like a faction of the Democrats. These were Southerners, obstructionists, segregationists. Okay. Strom Thurmond ran for president as a Dixiecrat in 1948. Strom Thurmond leaves the Republican Party because of the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65. He goes to the Republican Party and he died a Republican. So it's important for people to understand this history. And one of the things I explain to people when they read or hear speeches of Malcolm talking about Democrats, is like, you have to understand that Malcolm was assassinated before that change was completed, largely before that change was completed. Malcolm was assassinated February 21st, 1965. The Voting Rights Act wasn't signed till later that year. So this is one of the problems with quoting people who are dead, and you don't understand the history that happened after they died. You have to understand the subsequent 50 some odd years of history after Malcolm was assassinated to be able to put this stuff in perspective. Okay, so how's everybody doing today? Hey, share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. We got Sherilyn, John, Cerise, Paula, a few of the people watching. Follow us on our fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Hey, I'm Michael Imhotep. Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer. You can probably tell I'm a talk show host because I can talk. I've done national radio. I used to do we're doing national radio again with a Blog Talk radio show, but I do local radio here in Detroit, 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, WFDF. So I'll be on tomorrow night, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're just tuning in, hey, we're talking about, we started off talking about Colin Kaepernick's visit to Ghana and a message he posed to African Americans, asking them, why were they celebrating the 4th of July? He said, how could we truly celebrate independence on a day that robbed our ancestors of theirs? He was correct. Okay. Then we start talking about Frederick Douglass, because his most famous speech delivered July 5th, 1852. He was asked to speak to the Rochester Ladies Anti-Slavery Society, Rochester, New York, right? And his most famous speech, what to the slave is the 4th of July. Okay. And he said, this day is not our day. This is your day. He was basically saying my people are enslaved, robbed of their humanity, robbed of their rights, etc., can't vote, etc. But research Frederick Douglass. This is I did a couple of broadcasts about him, a couple of videos. We have him here on Facebook, have him on our YouTube channel. Check that out. We just posted information here about our online class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We normally do that class on Fridays, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All the sessions are recorded. As soon as you register, you can go back and watch the previous 3 sessions. We're doing a special session on Sunday, July 9th, 2017, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. And this is going to be kind of like a review of the previous 3 sessions. So if people register, you can get caught up. It's only $40 for the online course. We posted the link here. If you need me to post it again, let me know. I'll post it again. Register for it. We deal with this type of information. We deal with thousands of years of history. It'll totally blow you away. Okay, so Kelly said, I even hate the damn racist anthem. Okay. Samantha said, I agree completely with Kaepernick. All right, now, when we look at the national anthem, that is, so some people say, well, the 3rd stanza of the national anthem. Well, they took out the 3rd stanza of it. Well, you got to understand the history and who wrote it. That was written by Francis Scott Key after witnessing the battle at Fort McHenry, September 13th, 1814, during the War of 1812. The War of 1812. Okay. Francis Scott Key, a white supremacist slave owner. Family was got rich off of slavery, enslaving African people. He was a slave owner also. Okay. And he witnesses this battle, and he writes a poem called The Battle of the Defense of Fort McHenry. He writes a poem called The Defense of Fort McHenry. Okay. So this is September 13th, 1814. It's later going to become known as the Star Spangled Banner. Like later that year, it's going to become known as the Star Spangled Banner. And in 1931 is going to become the National Anthem. 1931 it becomes the National Anthem. All right. But there was there's a line in it that a lot of people talked about. And one of the things that happened, and there are a number of good things about Colin Kaepernick's protest, right? Now, Cap needs to study politics more. Cap needs to study politics more. Okay. He's learning. He ain't there yet. I'm just saying he's learning. He ain't there yet. The reason why is because you need to understand law and you have to understand history. So he's learning. He's on the right track. Okay. But when he said he didn't vote in the last election for president, you don't seem to understand there's a direct correlation between policy that's written by politicians and the president signs these laws that come from Congress into law. There's a direct correlation between that and policing, because there's a such thing as the Department of Justice. Now, if you pay attention, and I study policy and I study politics, if you pay attention to what's been going on, Donald Trump's Department of Justice has been reversing policies that President Obama had in place, and they're detrimental to African Americans. May 12, 2017, Jeff Sessions, who is the Attorney General, a white supremacist, who in 1986 was deemed too racist to be a federal judge. And Coretta Scott King warned us about Jeff Sessions. Coretta Scott King wrote a 9-page letter to the commission that was over the hearing for Jeff Sessions to be a federal judge. And she wrote why it would be detrimental for him to be a federal judge, and why it would and how it would dismantle Dr. King's legacy. Now, this letter was not introduced during the hearing. This letter wasn't heard. It was, if I remember correctly, it was the record of like the evidence, things like this. It was listed there, but it wasn't introduced. So people didn't hear it. Okay, we just found out about this. It was late last year or early this year that about this letter. We just found out about it. It went to Strom Thurmond. Strom Thurmond was one of the ones over the committee. It went to Strom Thurmond. Strom Thurmond did not present the letter from Coretta Scott King. And if you research it, Washington Post had an article about this. They were one of the first ones that had an article about this. It was Wes Lowry. I think he was the one that broke the story about this. And let's see. Flip that article. Okay, so the name of the article, because I have thousands of articles bookmarked, right? The name of the article is read the letter Coretta Scott King wrote opposing Sessions' 1986 federal nomination. Okay, read the letter Coretta Scott King wrote opposing Sessions' 1986 federal nomination. All right. Okay, so we'll post this link here on the thread of the broadcast so you can check this out. This is from the Washington Post. Read this letter. Okay, once again, African American women tried to save us. Okay, she tried to warn us about Jeff Sessions. So May 12, 2017, Jeff Sessions just redeclared the war on drugs, which had been declining under President Obama. See, a lot of people don't know. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't study policy. In politics impacts every aspect of our life. From the water you drink, to the air you breathe, to the food you eat, to everything deals with law. Everything deals with politics. Laws are written by politicians, passed by politicians, signed into law by politicians. Bills passed by the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate have to be signed into law by a president. Go back and watch Schoolhouse Rock. I'm a bill on Capitol Hill. You can watch it on YouTube. Refresh your memory, because a lot of people don't seem to understand this. So Jeff Sessions just declared the war on drugs May 12, 2017. How many people heard about this? He just redeclared the war on drugs. He reversed a President Obama era policy because President Obama instructed his Department of Justice, Attorney General Eric Holder, and then Loretta Lynch to stop pursuing the longest, harshest sentences on low-level nonviolent drug offenders. And this is one of the reasons why the U.S. prison population has dropped. The U.S. prison population is the lowest it's been in about 20 years. I don't know how many people actually know this. I keep hearing people say it's 2.3 million. No, that's not true. December 2015, it dropped down to 1.53 million, largely due to policies from President Barack Obama that most people don't even know exists until Donald Trump and his administration keep reversing these policies. This is how a lot of people find out that these policies existed in the first place, because they keep reversing them. You just had an EPA, you just had a reversal in the EPA policy that's going to negatively impact the water supply of 117 million people in the country, reversing an Obama era policy. If you look at what Betsy DeVos is doing with the Department of Education, most people don't even know the Department of Education has a civil rights department. One of the things that the Department of Education Civil Rights Department does is investigates rapes on college campuses. Do you understand Betsy DeVos is backing off of the investigation of rapes on college campuses? Have you been paying attention to the changes in the civil rights departments in the Environmental Protection Agency, the Civil Rights Department in the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Department in the Department of Education, the Civil Rights Department in the Department of Labor under Donald Trump? These are all policies. So when people make stupid ass remarks, well, I'm not for voting, I'm not for policy. You don't understand this. That's why you're getting screwed. Most of those people are broke as hell too, just so you understand. Most of the people are broke as hell because people that have money understand how politics impacts their lives, whether it's government contracts, whether it's taxes. They understand all those policies. They understand this. This is why when you go, I used to be a liaison to the Regional Chamber of Commerce here in the Detroit region. When you go there, there are wealthy people there. Why? Because they understand how policy impacts their businesses. See, a lot of poor people don't understand that. Well, wealthy people understand how policy impacts their businesses. This is why they make donations to political campaigns. This is why. See, the only poor people say rich people don't care about politics. Rich people don't say that. Only poor people say stuff like that because they don't understand how it works. Robert Mercer didn't say that. Robert Mercer was one of the main financiers of Donald Trump. You know who Robert Mercer is? Hedge fund manager, billionaire. Do you understand that Robert Mercer was the main financier of Breitbart News, Breitbart.com? Do you understand that Kellyanne Conway, who is a senior advisor to Donald Trump, was running Robert Mercer's family's super PAC before she came over to the Trump campaign? You understand that David Bossie, before he came over to the Trump campaign during the election, was running Robert Mercer's super PAC? You understand that Stephen K. Bannon was a co-founder of Breitbart.com, and he's brought over from Breitbart, which Robert Mercer was the main financier of. He's brought over to be the CEO of the Donald Trump campaign in August of 2016 after Paul Manafort has to resign his position. And now Stephen K. Bannon, a white supremacist who said that Breitbart News is the home of the alt-right, he is the chief strategist for Donald Trump. Only poor people say rich people don't care about politics. Only poor people say stuff like that. Sheldon Adelson, billionaire, main financier of Donald Trump. You understand that Core Civic, which used to be Corrections Corporation of America, which is the largest owner-operator of privatized prisons in the country, and Geo Group, which used to be Wackenhut, the second largest owner-operator of privatized prisons in the country. You understand they donated $600,000 to Donald Trump's campaign, and you think rich people don't care about politics? You're a damn fool. You're a goddamn fool if you think that. Only poor people think stuff like that. Only poor people think stuff like that. You better do some research. All right. And then what did Donald Trump say March 2016 when he was interviewed by Chris Matthews on MSNBC about privatized prisons? He said privatized prisons seem to work very well and they seem to save money. And what did Donald Trump do when he became president? He reversed an Obama era policy because in August of 2016, President Obama said that they were not going to renew contracts for federal prisoners with privatized prisons. And the day that news came out, the stock price of Core Civic, which used to be Corrections Corporation of America, dropped 40% in one day. And Donald Trump and Jeff Sessions, they have reversed that, and they're going to continue using privatized prisons for federal prisoners. And at one point in the last few months, the stock price of Core Civic was up 148%, and the stock price of Geo Group was up 98%. And then those two donated almost $600,000 to Donald Trump campaign. And you got poor people saying rich people don't care about politics. You have no idea. You better do some research, because when you have bad information, you make stupid ass decisions. When you have bad information, you make stupid ass decisions. The DeVos family has been fired, but they have been financing school choice and private charter schools in Michigan for years. And now she's Secretary of Education. One of the things the Civil Rights Department at the Department of Education does is investigates suspensions of students, especially students of color, all different types of things like this, the school to prison pipeline, things like this. The Department of Education investigates that. Department of Education is over the allocation of student loans and Pell Grants. Betsy DeVos is being sued by 18 attorney generals for trying to reverse an Obama era policy that most people don't even know existed. Article from the Washington Post, July 6, 2017. Attorneys General sues DeVos over delay of rule to protect students from predatory colleges. People don't understand the scope of the Department of Justice. Just homeschooling your kids ain't going to protect you. People don't understand the scope of the Department of Justice. A group of 19 state attorneys general is suing Education Secretary Betsy DeVos for delaying an overhaul of rules to erase the federal student debt of borrowers defrauded by colleges. So this deals with predatory colleges because the Obama administration shut down a lot of these predatory colleges that were charging exorbitant rates. They had people taking out student loans to go to these schools. ITT Tech was one of them. ITT Tech was shut down by the Obama administration. And then what happened was a lot of these schools had a poor rate when it came to finding jobs for these people who took out loans. Well, President Obama shut down a lot of these schools, and a lot of these schools targeted African Americans and Hispanics. You see the commercials when you watch Jerry Springer and you watch Judge Hatchett and you watch daytime TV. You see all these commercials. The Obama administration shut down a lot of these schools, and rightfully so. Okay, so you have a lot of these schools who defrauded the students because they took out these student loan debts. Okay, so the question is, okay, now do they still have to pay back these loans? They don't have a job. And they basically lied to, and these schools are put out of business. So what Betsy DeVos is trying to do is the changes that President Obama put in place were supposed to go into effect July 1st. Betsy DeVos has suspended these changes in June of 2017 and said she will convene a new rulemaking committee to rewrite the borrower defense regulation, reviving a process that took nearly two years to complete. Proponents of the revised rule were livid that Betsy DeVos made a unilateral decision without soliciting or receiving input from stakeholders or the public. Read this article, Washington Post. I got I actually have thousands of articles, but This is one of the things we're going to talk about tomorrow night on the African History Network show. And you got people talking about, oh, I'm not into politics. I mean, politics is in your ass from your birth to your death. You have no clue, no understanding of this. And I'm telling you, we about to be wiped out because of our own ignorance. We about to be wiped out because of our own ignorance. Okay, let's see here on Facebook. Okay, you got a lot of people. Share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. How's everybody doing? How you like this type of information? Robin said all day. Samantha. Okay, Kemet's on here. Solace Horsey. Okay. Let's see. All right, so read the articles we post here on our Facebook page, because we post information about this. I just posted the article a few days ago, a couple of days ago, dealing with Betsy DeVos and sexual assaults, okay, on college campuses. How many of you all have daughters who are in college right now? Under her secretary, under her Department of Education, they are backing off the number of sexual assaults they investigate on college campuses. I'm going to try to pull up that article right quick here so you can see this, okay? Because see, elections have consequences. This is the problem, that this is what people don't understand. Elections have consequences. All right, let's see here. And Betsy DeVos is totally unqualified to be Secretary of Education. Totally unqualified to be Secretary of Education. Okay, so that's scaling back. Oh, this is the one I'm looking for. So HuffingtonPost.com had this article, and other outlets had the article also. This is from a couple of days ago. Betsy DeVos is under fire for scaling back campus rape investigations. Betsy DeVos is under fire for scaling back campus rape allegations. Okay. Let's go to this here. All right. The Department of Education is scrapping Obama-era rules for holding universities accountable. Oh, but I thought Obama didn't do anything. How can Trump and his administration keep undoing policies that Obama put in place if Obama didn't do anything? Senators Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat from New York, and Claire McCaskill, Democrat from Missouri, urged Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos last week to reverse a decision her department made last month that would impede its ability to investigate campus sexual assault. The head of the Department of Education Civil Rights Office, Candace Jackson. Now, Candace Jackson is a white woman who has no business being the head of any type of civil rights department, because she's not for civil rights. Go study Candace Jackson. Okay. So in June, so the head of the Department of Education Civil Rights Office, Candace Jackson, issued a memo in June instructing staff to scale back their investigations of systemic civil rights issues at public schools and universities, including the mishandling of sexual assault cases. Well, wait a second. Donald Trump asked African Americans, what the hell do you have to lose? This doesn't sound too good. This don't sound like you trying to make America great again. Now, keep in mind that Betsy DeVos was nominated by Donald Trump, who's a sexual predator. Keep in mind, Betsy DeVos was nominated by Donald Trump, who's a sexual predator. And now her Department of Education is scaling back college campus rape investigations. Interesting. The head of the Department of Education's Civil Rights Office, Candace Jackson, issued a memo in June of 2017 instructing staff to scale back their investigations of systemic civil rights issues at public schools and universities, including the mishandling of sexual assault cases. Whereas the Obama administration required staff to review past information along with each complaint to identify potential systemic problems with how college campuses handle rape cases or discriminate against certain classes of victims, the Trump administration will scrap those rules and investigate each complaint at face value. Then they go in and talk about what the problem is and just investigate it at face value. But see, many of our people don't understand how elections have consequences. All right, so let's go to some of your comments here, and then we're going to do a quick overview of our online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, we'll post a link again. How's everybody doing this evening? Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. And we started out talking about Colin Kaepernick and his visit to Ghana, and it's a message to African Americans about celebrating the 4th of July, or as Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango called it, the 4th of July. We just posted the link again there. You can register for the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, is a 12-hour 6-week online course that I teach. All the sessions are recorded. We do it live, normally on Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it over and over again as well. So as soon as you register, you can watch the first 3 sessions. We're going to do a special session on Sunday, July 9th. Sunday, July 9th, we'll do a special session, and we're going to do like a review. Okay, so if that's your first time registering, if that's your first class, it'll be a good review for you. Okay, we'll do a review of the previous classes here, and we deal with thousands of years of history. As I said at the beginning of the broadcast, we talked about Colin Kaepernick and the transatlantic slave trade. Transatlantic slave trade happened, but there were already African people in this land we call the United States of America, and there were more African people who were already here, and we had been here for tens of thousands of years than the numbers that were brought here during the transatlantic slave trade. You're only dealing with between 388,000 and 1.4 million that were brought here during the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, and then we talked some about the Star Spangled Banner as well, which was written September 13th, 1814. It's called the Battle of Fort McHenry. Originally, it was a poem called the Battle of Fort McHenry. And it was written by Francis Scott Key, a white supremacist slave owner. All right. And some people talk about the third stanza. I know there was a good article written by Dr. Jason Johnson for theroot.com, theroot.com. And in the article is called Star Spangled Bigotry, the Hidden Racist History of the National Anthem. Star Spangled Bigotry, the Hidden Racist History of the National Anthem. Okay. And he talks about how the national anthem talks about how the third stanza of the national anthem, it says, and where is that band who so vauntingly swore that the havoc of war and the battle's confusion, a home and a country should leave us no more. Their blood has washed out their foul footsteps, pollution. No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. Okay. So read the article from Dr. Jason Johnson, theroot.com, Star Spangled Bigotry, the Hidden Racist History of the National Anthem. Also read the article from Snopes.com, which dispels internet rumors. The Star Spangled Banner and Slavery, the Star Spangled Banner and Slavery. So some people say, well, the third stanza was taken out. No, this was a white supremacist song written by a white supremacist, okay, who thought that African people were inferior, who enslaved African people also. Okay, Francis Scott Key. And if you read the article from Smithsonian.com, official website of the Smithsonian Institute, Smithsonian.com, where's the debate on Francis Scott Key's slaveholding legacy? Where's the debate on Francis Scott Key's slaveholding legacy? And in the article, it talks about how when he wrote the poem that would in 1931 become the national anthem and proclaim our nation the land of the free. Like Thomas Jefferson, Francis Scott Key not only profited from slaves, he harbored racist conceptions of American citizenship and human potential. Africans in America, he said, were, quote, a distinct and inferior race of people, which all experience proves to be the greatest evil that afflicts a community, end quote. Now, this is Francis Scott Key, the man who wrote the national anthem. This is his thoughts about enslaved African people. He owned slaves, his family owned slaves, got rich off of this, but this is what he thought about African people. So when you understand the history of the national anthem and who wrote it, it's a white supremacist song. Just taking out the third stanza doesn't change. No, it's a white supremacist song. Okay. And read the article from history.com, official website of the History Channel, history.com. September 13th, 1840, K-E-Y, pens Star Spangled Banner. Okay. September 13th, 1814, Key pens Star Spangled Banner. Talking about Francis Scott Key. Read that article also. Gives you background information on it. But the article from the Smithsonian.com, which is the official website of the Smithsonian Institute, that's a deep article because that's about 6-7 pages, something like that. I printed it up. It's about 7 pages. Okay. During his lifetime, abolitionists ridiculed Francis Scott Key's words, sneering that America was more like land of the free and home of the oppressed. The article is from July 1st, 2016. Okay. All right. So let's go to Facebook quickly here. Robin said we grew up singing Lift Every Voice in Chicago. And we need a new black national anthem, because if you read the words to Lift Every Voice and Sing, that was if I remember correctly, that was a gospel hymn. Lift every voice and sing. You read it, you read it is not something that is talking about African Americans focusing on economic empowerment, fighting against white supremacy, controlling the economics in our community, things like this. Manning said, wow. Sharon said, cut limbs off. Not sure what he's talking about. Colorado said, if you know your history, you can't be defeated. Okay. All right. So this is Dr. David Imhotep. We talk about him in our online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Understanding the slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So Kemet said we need a black political party. Well, there is a black political party. You can check out what is it called? Amafika Geuka and Jim Klingman. 1 million conscious black voters and contributors. 1 million conscious black voters and contributors. You can Google that, 1 million conscious black voters and contributors. There's some other small African-American parties as well. They have to be financed, number one. Number two, we have to study politics. Okay. So what may work, because what worked for the Republican Party, which is not a freedom caucus, was a party within a party. A party, the Tea Party. I should say what worked for the Tea Party, not the Republican Party. The Tea Party. A lot of people thought the Tea Party was a separate party. No, the Tea Party is a faction of the Republican Party. It's a more extreme faction of the Republican Party. Now they're called the Freedom Caucus. But the Tea Party was very effective back in 2010, 2012. The Tea Party was very effective. And they were a faction of the Republican Party. So first you have to have an agenda. Okay. And I encourage people to download go to cbc.house.gov, cbc.house.gov. Download We Have a Lot to Lose. We Have a Lot to Lose. Okay. And that was the 130-page agenda that the Congressional Black Caucus presented to Donald Trump. But that should be an agenda for all of us, because every African-American organization in this country can take elements from that and create a very powerful agenda that they can implement on a local, on a state and national level. Okay. So any political party has to be financed. But if you study the Tea Party, and we need to focus on what's going to actually work as opposed to what sounds good. Tea Party was a faction of the Republican Party that pulled the Republican Party further to the right, pulled the candidates further to the right. So African Americans should really look at having a faction, having a party within the Democratic Party. They should really look at that really concentrates and deals with our issues and coalesce groups of voters into voting blocks. Okay. The reason why is because more of the policies coming from the Democratic Party are beneficial to African Americans than coming from the Republican Party. And then when it comes time to getting candidates statewide, or especially on a national basis, like for president, et cetera, it's easier when you are a member of one of the larger parties. This is why Bernie Sanders joined the Democratic Party in 2000. I think he joined in 2015. I think it was. He joined the Democratic Party. Only reason why Bernie Sanders joined the Democratic Party, who's been in Congress for 25 years as an independent, only reason why he joined was to run for president, so that he didn't have to go through the process of getting a certain number of signatures in certain number of states to be on those ballots, as a presidential candidate. Okay, to have his name on there, there's a process you have to go through. If you are running on one of the two major, as a candidate from one of the two major parties, you don't have to go through that process. Okay, so so this is Dr. David Imhotep. He wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. We talk about him in the class. I've interviewed him a number of times. His book deals with how his book deals with the African presence in this country dating back at least 51,700 years ago. At least 51,700 years ago. Okay. And on page 14 of his book, he talks about a discovery made by Dr. Albert Goodyear in Allendale County, South Carolina, in 2004. And they found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with linguistics. Genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. Okay, this is page 14 of his book. His book has 713 footnotes. It's thoroughly documented. But we have to understand, so when we deal with the transatlantic slave trade, we don't deal with it episodically. Okay, we deal with it as a we deal with it chronologically. Okay, you have to deal with it chronologically. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. We deal with the African presence in this country going back tens of thousands of years. We deal with how the Africans known as the Moors, who go into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal, 711 AD. How this sets up Columbus to set sail on his 4 voyages, and Columbus and his 4 voyages are going to cause the transatlantic slave trade and the whole slavery system to totally explode, because Columbus is discovering these so-called new lands to Europeans, and he opens up the so-called new world to these European nations coming in to exploit these lands. Hispaniola, which becomes Haiti, San Salvador, which becomes the Bahamas, Cuba, Boricuan, which becomes Puerto Rico, Panama, Honduras, things like this. And they're going to set up slave plantations in these lands. One of the popular slave plantations was sugarcane plantations, because sugar was king before cotton was king. Sugar was king before cotton was king. Sugar cotton largely becomes king. One of the things that really boosts cotton to really become king was the invention of the cotton gin in 1793 by Eli Whitney, and then copies of the cotton gin, which makes it easier and more efficient to pull the seeds out of the cotton, which reduces the overall cost to produce the cotton, reduces the overall cost of the products that are made, makes them more affordable, but it also increases the profitability of producing cotton as well. Okay, which causes a need for more slaves. Then in 1803, when the Louisiana Purchase is signed, the U.S. gets 828,000 square miles of land for less than 3 cents an acre, and the U.S. is able to carve out about 15 states out of this new land, which doubles the territory of the U.S. at the time in 1803, which gives new land for crops to be planted, which fuels a need for more enslaved Africans, etc. Okay, they're going to try to, you're going to have some states that are free states, but you're going to have some of those states that allow slavery also. Okay. So Sherilyn said the DNC selected Clinton in the 2016 primary, showed the People's Choice Bernie. You really should go research that. You really should go research that and separate fact from fiction, and understand that Hillary Clinton had been a Democrat for 40 years. Bernie Sanders had been in Congress for 25 years. So whenever he wanted to be a Democrat, he could be a Democrat. So he was looked at as an outsider to the Democratic Party. Like, who is this guy? He's been in Congress 25 years. Bernie Sanders is not new. He's a nice guy. I like Bernie. Bernie Sanders ain't new. He's new to a lot of people who don't follow politics. I've been seeing Bernie Sanders for years on MSNBC before he ran for president. Bernie Sanders is in the documentaries Alec Exposed and Koch brothers Exposed. Bernie Sanders he started out in the U.S. House of Representatives in 1991. He voted for the crime bill in 1994. Why Black Lives Matter didn't protest him for voting for the crime bill, I really don't understand that. Because Black Lives Matter Black Lives Matter. I'm not against Black Lives Matter, but they didn't protest against Joe Biden, who wrote the crime bill. Bill Clinton did not write that crime bill. Go do some research. Senator Joe Biden worked on that crime bill for 6 years. Joe Biden was the chief architect and main sponsor of the 1994 Omnibus Crime Bill. Clinton signed the bill his second year in office. September 13th, 1994 was when the crime bill was signed. Joe Biden worked on that crime bill for 6 years. It was Joe Biden, Senator Joe Biden, who became Vice President Joe Biden, who said we need longer, harsher sentences in the crime bill to get Republicans to vote for it. Why didn't Black Lives Matter protest Joe Biden? And Black Lives Matter didn't protest Bernie Sanders for voting for the crime bill in 94. They protested him for not saying her name, stuff like that. They didn't protest him for voting for the crime bill. I just find it very interesting. Most of them didn't know that Joe Biden wrote the crime bill. Most of them did. And the other thing is 87% of the people that went to prison during the 2 terms of Clinton, they went under state law, not federal law. That crime bill was federal law. Go research that. That crime bill was federal law. States had already started passing longer, harsher sentences going back to the 1970s. Mandatory minimums did not start with the 94 crime bill. Mandatory minimums go back to 1973 with Governor Nelson D. Rockefeller and the Rockefeller drug laws in the state of New York. That's when mandatory minimums go back to, because Governor Nelson D. Rockefeller wanted to run for president. He was an advocate of getting rehabilitation, getting treatment for drug offenders, things like this. But because of a changing mood in the country that goes back to June 17th, 1971, where Richard Nixon declaring his war on drugs in front of the U.S. Congress, because that's when the war on drugs starts, June 17th, 1971, with Richard Nixon, which was a war on the anti-war left, the hippies, and the war on the African-American community. And this is something that John Ehrlichman, his former domestic policy advisor, revealed to a writer named Dan Baum, B-A-U-M, in 1994. And in April of 2016, Dan Baum had a front page news story for Harper's Magazine, the April 2016 edition, and it was called Legalize It All. Legalize It All. And Dan Baum talks about what the war on drugs was really about, as told to him by John Ehrlichman, who was Richard Nixon's domestic policy advisor. This is all easily verifiable. Use Google. This is all easily verifiable. I can document what I'm talking about. This is all easy verifiable. I have a lecture that I've done called How Richard Nixon's War on Drugs Was a War on the African American Community. I deal with all this stuff in there because I've gone and researched it. And because of a changing mood, because of a changing perception, you have movies like The French Connection and things like this, because of a changing mood in the country towards drug users, Governor Nelson D. Rockefeller, who was the governor of New York, wanted to run for president. So he felt that he had to change his position on drug users, etc., to fit the growing mood in the country. So he took a hard line towards drug users, and he signed a law in 1973 in the state of New York to give 15 years to life for low-level drug offenders, even nonviolent drug offenders, for having small amounts of cocaine and heroin and marijuana. The mandatory minimums did not start in 94. Mandatory minimums go back to 1973. And when you study the 70s and 80s, states had already started passing longer, harsher prison sentences in the 70s and in the 80s, leading into the early 90s, before the crime bill was signed. That wasn't signed on September 13th, 1994. That one signed on September 13th, 1994. People really need to do some research. And Google Legalize It All. Harper's Magazine, Legalize It All. Let's see here. There was a article from NPR about this article here, Rockefeller drug laws, npr.com, npr.org. I think it is National Public Radio. And this deals with Nelson Rockefeller and the origins of the Rockefeller drug laws and mandatory minimums. It's npr.org. So this is why our people need to understand history and understand law, because we don't understand either one of them. This is one of the reasons why we're screwed up. When you have bad information, you make bad decisions. Law comes from politics. We have to understand history. We have to understand law. Okay, we just posted an article there. Okay, so this is Dr. Albert Goodyear. Okay. So Dr. Albert Goodyear is an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina. All right. And we talk about some of this information in our online course. This deals with his discovery in 2004. Okay. Now, this is an article from ScienceDaily.com. ScienceDaily.com. All right. And ScienceDaily.com, it says, the name of this article, New Evidence Puts Man in North America 50,000 Years Ago. Says radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains where artifacts were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County, South Carolina, by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Albert Goodyear, indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age, meaning that humans inhabited North America before the last ice age. Okay. ScienceDaily.com, scientific journal. That article came out back in 2004. That's when the discovery was made. Okay. So we deal with a chronology of history, and we do a lot of archaeological discoveries, because these archaeological discoveries are happening all the time. And when these discoveries take place, they keep having to push dates back. They keep having to push dates back. Okay. This discovery, was an article from the New York Times. Okay. On Crete, new evidence of very ancient mariners. On Crete, new evidence of very ancient mariners. And this was from February 15th, 2010. February 15th, 2010. And in this article, it talks about how on the Greek island of Crete, over the course of 2 summers, they did excavations, and they found stone tools that date back at least 130,000 years ago. They found stone tools that date back at least 130,000 years ago on the Greek island of Crete. Okay. And they said this is strong evidence for the earliest known seafaring in the Mediterranean, and calls for rethinking the maritime capabilities of pre-human cultures. Well, first of all, many of our scholars like Dr. David Imhotep, Runoko Rashidi, Dr. Charles Finch, they've been saying modern man, Homo sapiens, are not 75,000 to 100,000 years old, not 200,000 years old, but at least 300,000 years old. Okay. So we had maritime capabilities 130,000 years ago sailing. All right. And when you read this article, it talks about how this is causing scientists to have to rethink everything. And these new discoveries that take place, just like the one April 26th, we talked about it last night in last night's class, April 26, 2017, April of this year. You had a mastodon skeleton found in San Diego. Now, mastodon is a prehistoric animal, it's a predecessor to the elephants. And they said that the paleontologists, who are scientists who study dinosaurs and dinosaur bones, things like this, the paleontologists said that this skeleton was smashed by humans, and the tools that they believe the humans used to smash it were nearby. And if this is correct, this puts a human presence in North America 130,000 years ago, which is over 100,000 years before the most widely held discovery and data shows when humans first came here, which is the Clovis culture in New Mexico, which dates back about 13,000 years ago. That's stated as the site of the first civilization, or oldest archaeological evidence of modern man being in this land, the Clovis culture. Well, there's evidence to blow that out the water and push that date way back. And when these archaeological discoveries come out, they keep having to push dates back. You just had a discovery in Morocco in June of 2017. And in Morocco, which is in North Africa, they found skeletons of modern man, Homo sapiens, that date back between 300,000, 350,000 years ago. But the oldest skeletons they had, or oldest fossil remains they had prior to this, were found in Ethiopia and date back 195,000 years ago. Well, the discovery in Morocco in June of 2017 blows that out the water. So the deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets. The more research they do, the older we get. The deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets. The more research they do, the older we get. All right, so somebody asked me to post the link. So I think you were talking about the link. So Kemet said, post the link. Okay, were you talking about the link to the article from NPR.org, National Public Radio, about the Rockefeller drug laws? If so, I already posted that. Okay. If you need me to post a link so you can register for our online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach in school, let me know. We're doing a special session of this on Sunday, July 9th, 2017, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Normally we do it on Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The sessions, we do them live, but they're all recorded. So as soon as you register for the class, it's only $40 for the course. I don't think I've said that so far. Jumping ahead of myself. I'm all over the place. It's only $40 for the course. It's a 12-hour, 6-week online course taught by yours truly. And as soon as you register, you can watch the first 3 sessions. And you can also watch, we have about 12 hours of bonus content also. Okay. And the class will totally blow you away. All right. So we deal with archaeological discoveries and we deal with a chronology of history. One of the things we deal with is examples of the suppression of the knowledge, because we also have to understand why history and culture were taken away from us as well. And we deal with the example of the Druids, right? The Druids in Ireland. And the Druids are dealing with a watered down version of teachings coming out of ancient Kemet, coming out of ancient Egypt. All right. Kemet, one of the original names for Egypt. Kemet meaning land of the blacks. Egypt is still in Africa, for those that don't know it, even though Arabs are in control. Egypt is still in Africa. It's not in the fictitious Middle East. It's still in Africa. But Druid is in Old Irish means he who knows, he who knows. And the Druids are dealing with a watered down version of teachings coming out of ancient Kemet, and their spirituality is centered around this. Okay. And they're dealing with what's known as the gnosis, Gnosis, the gnosis. And the gnosis means the true knowledge. And what they're dealing with deals with understanding the power of God that exists inside of man, which comes from the story of Asar, Set, and Heru, okay, and tapping into that power and acquiring knowledge to raise your conscious level. And you deal with this when you deal with the concept of the Ka rest, Ka meaning rest, Ka meaning spirit, rest meaning to rise. And the concept of the Ka rest, and from Ka rest, you get the Greek word Christos. And from the Greek word Christos, you get Christ. And Christ is a title, not a name. So if you read Christianity Before Christ by Dr. John G. Jackson, this is something that he talks about in there, Christianity Before Christ by Dr. John G. Jackson. Or if you read The World's 16 Crucified Saviors by Kirsty Graves, The World's 16 Crucified Saviors. He also actually talks about 27 of them in there, which came out, that book came out in about the 1870s. So you have a battle between the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Druids, because the Eastern Orthodox Church, now this is in 432 AD. This is before the Catholic Church comes into existence. The Catholic Church, when you actually research it, does not come into existence until the 11th century AD, right around 1050 AD. Catholic Church does not exist at the time of the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, the First Council of Constantinople 381 AD, the Council of Ephesus 431. The Catholic Church doesn't exist then. It's the Eastern Orthodox Church. I know people like to say the Catholic Church back at that time. The Catholic Church didn't exist. So you're going to have a battle between the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Druids, because the Eastern Orthodox Church wants to spread Christianity. The Druids are standing in the way of that. So Pope Celestine I in 432 AD sends a British slave into Ireland named Patrick to spread Christianity and kill the Druids. And this is what Patrick does. And Patrick dies March 17, 462 AD, I think it is, 461, 462. And people celebrate his feast day today on March 17th. It's called St. Patrick's Day. But Patrick was a mass murderer for the Christian church. Why Irish celebrate Patrick, I really don't understand. Why African Americans celebrate St. Patrick's Day, I really don't understand that. That doesn't make sense. Read African people and European holidays and mental genocide by Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango. Read African people and European holidays and mental genocide by Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango, because he breaks down the history of a lot of these holidays that we have been taught by Europeans to celebrate. Okay. We'll post a link again right here. You can register for our online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, where they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is some of the type of information we deal with in the class, and all the sessions are recorded also. So as soon as you register, you can watch the previous three sessions, and you'll be ready. We're doing a special class on Sunday, July 9th, 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. I should say, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're doing a special class then. Okay, so let me continue here for a few more minutes. How's everybody doing? If you have any questions, go ahead and post your comments here. If you have any questions, are you all learning anything? How you like this type of information? You all learning anything? How many of you, this is your first time watching a broadcast that I've done? I guess I should have said at the beginning that I may say some things that are outside the circumference of your own awareness. Just because you never heard them before does not mean that they are not true. It just means you have to do some research to understand what I'm talking about. I usually preface some of my presentations and broadcasts. I usually preface it with that. I ain't do it this time. All right, so let's continue here. Okay, so here's another discovery, right? April 30th, 2013. You have this article from news.yahoo.com. News.yahoo.com. Now, this is about the lost city of Egypt called Tanis Heraklion. Tanis Heraklion. Okay. And this city has been lost for 1,200 years. Now, prior to this discovery, the lost city of Tanis Heraklion was basically known of on paper. They didn't have archaeological evidence of it. Okay. But the Telegraph, so the yahoonews.com, they picked up this article from the Telegraph. The Telegraph reports that 150 feet beneath the surface of Egypt's Bay of Abu Qir, they found 64 ships that had sunken. 64 ships, 16-foot tall statues, 700 anchors, and countless gold coins and smaller artifacts. Okay. This is from the lost city of Egypt called Tanis Heraklion that sunk into the sea 1,200 years ago. It's believed that the city was built around 8th century BC. Okay. And they showed some of the findings, right? They showed some of the things they found at the bottom of the sea. These huge statues. Okay. This is from ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet. All right. Found at the bottom of the sea. They found 16-foot tall statues of Auset, Isis, who the Greeks call Isis. We didn't call her Isis. Her name was Auset. Auset means she of throne. Throne, she of throne. You see the legs broken off of a statue. Now this is from the horns that you see, like the helmet on Auset's head, or the horns on her head, and the sun disk. Okay. This is broken off probably from a statue of Auset or Isis. All right. So this is just some of the stuff they found in this archaeological discovery. And when they find these discoveries, it causes them to have to rethink everything, push dates back, etc. Have to rethink everything. The deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets, the more research they do, the older we get. So we deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, right? Who are descendants of the Garamantes. They go into the Iberian Peninsula, 711 AD, which today is called Spain and Portugal. They go all throughout Europe. They're in Sicily, they're in Crete, they're in France, Italy, Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia. They go all throughout Europe. And they civilize Europe. They introduce science, mathematics. They introduce alcohol, soap, because Europeans largely weren't bathing. They're going to introduce something called alchemy, which today we call chemistry. They introduced the periodic tables, spherical globes, almanacs, all different types of foods, different types of food preservation systems, introduce sanitation systems because Europe is filthy. They're going to build castles. They build libraries. The first university in Spain, University of Salamanca, 1285 AD, is built by African Moors and Arabs. A lot of the universities in Europe, University of Toledo, Bologna, Barcelona, things like this. A lot of these early European universities were built to study the teachings that the Moors took into Europe, to study the Moor science text, to study the teachings the Moors took into Europe. And when Columbus set sail on his 4 voyages, not only does he have Moors navigating some of his ships, but he's using nautical instruments based upon technology that the Moors introduced into Europe. So this is why when you study the transatlantic slave trade, you can't start in 1619. You can't start in the 1520s with the Spanish taking Africans into the territory we today call South Carolina. You have to deal with a chronology of history, okay? You have to deal with a chronology of history. And the Moors are going to be, the Moors are what George G.M. James calls the custodians of the ancient Egyptian mystery system. Okay, teachings coming out of ancient Kemet, the mystery system. George G.M. James wrote Stolen Legacy. And the teachings that, and see, the Moors are going to teach Europeans. They're going to teach Europeans freely, which is a mistake. Came to bite us in the behind. But one group of Europeans that gets this information is called the Poor Knights of Christ. They're formed in 1118 AD during the Second Crusades. They're going to be known as the Knights Templar. And they're going to get this information, become very powerful, because when the Moors go in, 85 to 90% of Europeans were illiterate. You had kings and queens who were illiterate. Okay. And the Knights Templar are going to be, you're going to have a group of them rounded up, disbanded, 1307, October 13th, 1307. It was a Friday. This was said to be the day that, this is one of the reasons why Friday the 13th is said to be unlucky, because this was said to be the day that the knowledge stopped. Friday the 13th, 1307. Okay. Now, this is before the introduction of the Gregorian calendar, which is the calendar we use today, which was not introduced until 1582 AD by Pope Gregory the 13th. So this is before the introduction of the Gregorian calendar. Okay. So I think it was the Julian calendar they were still using at that time. Okay. But if you read the article from history.com, we talk about this, we deal with all this in our online course, right? If you read the article from history.com, who were the Knights Templar? Who were the Knights Templar? This gives you some background information. Okay. And you're going to have scores of the French Knights Templar who are going to be arrested October 13th, 1307. It was on a Friday. Along with the order's Grand Master Jacques de Molay. They're going to be charged with a host of offenses ranging from heresy, devil worship, and spitting on the cross to homosexuality, fraud, and financial corruption. The men were brutally tortured. Many, including Jacques de Molay, confessed under duress, etc. King Philip then convinced Pope Clement V who had raised concerns about the Knights Templar secret initiation rites and practices in the past to launch his own inquiry, etc. Okay, you can have other groups of them rounded up. But what happens is when the Knights Templar are disbanded, their teachings go underground and they resurface as the Scottish Rites of the Freemasons, as the Rosicrucians, as these other secret societies or societies with secrets. And these Freemasons are going to be some of the founding fathers of this country. 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. And Freemasonry is based upon teachings coming out of ancient Kemet, watered down teachings coming out of ancient Kemet, but their symbolism, a lot of the symbolism goes back to ancient Egypt, ancient Africa. And we see it with the Washington Monument. So here is the MLK Memorial, Dr. King's Monument. And you see the Washington Monument nearby. This is in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., the layout of Washington, D.C. is based upon ancient African principles. It's similar to the layout of ancient Egypt. And the Washington Monument is actually called a tekken. Greeks call it an obelisk. It's called a tekken. Tekkenu for plural. And there were 1,200 tekkenu throughout ancient Kemet. There are only about 12 there now. A lot of them have been dispersed to different cities around the world. Paris, France, Istanbul, Turkey, Vatican City, Italy, things like this, right? But this is our history and our culture. And it's all throughout Washington, D.C. Many of us don't know it. Okay. So we talk about some Freemasonry, things like this. We talk about our Sorrow Set and Heru. We talk about we have to deal with religion some because you're dealing with history and how religion impacts us and influences the transatlantic slave trade, and how you go from the first holy trinity of Asar, Set, and Heru, who the Greeks call Isis, Osiris, and Horus, how you have a change in this. These were African people. You see all set here on the right with the helmet and the horns and the sun disk, right? Okay. And then you see that copy also with Isis, the white superhero from DC Comics. And they had the TV show in the 1970s, the Shazam and Isis Hour, and they had the Secrets of Isis, and she has symbolism coming out of ancient Egypt. She has symbolism coming out of ancient Egypt. This picture is from the cover of the DVD box set of the complete series of the Secrets of Isis. Okay. It's on Hulu. Last time I checked, it was on Hulu, the streaming service Hulu. So you can watch some episodes there. Okay. So we have to understand the chronology of history. And from Set the Virgin, who gives birth to Heru on December 25th of a virgin birth. She has an immaculate conception. There's an adoration, all of this. Okay. And an annunciation. From this, you get the Black Madonna and child worship all throughout Europe, because Europeans used to worship the African woman, worship all throughout Europe, the Black Madonna and child. And then with the rise of white supremacy, the rise of European nations coming out of the Dark Ages, conquering other people's lands, stealing their mineral wealth, rebuilding Europe, you have a rise in the European phenotype, and you have a reinterpretation of previous images that were African. Things like this, and you get the decolorized version. You get the Theotokos, okay, which comes out of one of the ecumenical councils. I think that was the Council of Ephesus in 431 AD, where they create Mary, the mother of God, the Theotokos. Theotokos means mother of God. I think it was that one, or either the Council of Chalcedon in 451 AD. Okay, so now you have the decolorized version. All right. So this is some of the information we deal with. We deal with the origins of the word Africa in America. We deal with the transatlantic slave trade. We deal with the Moors, Christopher Columbus, all the stuff. And Columbus never came to the land we call the United States of America either. When you study his 4 voyages, he never comes to the land we call the United States of America. Okay. We deal with the origins of racism, Hannibal Barker, a lot of information we deal with, okay, in the online course. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, okay. We'll post a link again. You can register for our online course. We're teaching a special session of it Sunday, July 9th, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Sunday, July 9th. 2017, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Okay, teaching a special session of it. We'll post a link here. And if you have any questions here on Facebook, you can ask your questions. We'll be here for. We have to get out of here, but I'll stand by and answer your questions. It's only $40 for the online course. As soon as you register, you can watch the first 3 sessions. You can watch the session we did Friday, July 7th, and we have about 12 hours of bonus content. Okay, so this information is totally going to blow your mind. We deal with thousands of years of history. Okay, I'm Michael Imhotep.